All right, welcome. What happened to the Wild this year? I had them as, I think, the 3 seed or a wild card as my preseason projections, pretty solidly making the playoffs. I don't go by other people's preseason rankings or projections, but a lot of people also had the Wild as kind of a lock to make the playoffs. Not the best team in their division, but better than the teams below them. What happened? They're what are they sitting? 8 points outside of a wild card spot right now behind the Kings, 10 points behind the Nashville Predators. They just lost to the Nashville Predators and St. Louis Blues, two teams they need to really jump in order to make the playoffs. 20 or so games left. They're probably not going to make the playoffs at this point. I think it's safe to say this is a miss this year for the Wild. So what happened? If you're not watching the Wild throughout the year, it's probably a little more of a mystery. It's tough to see on the outside what's going on. You can usually blame one thing like injuries, but in reality, it's a lot more complex than that, and there are a lot of little things that need to be improved upon next year. Let's start off. This is just, Cap Friendly's line projections, right? So we obviously know it changes on a nightly basis behind that bench with the coach making some adjustments. First line, you got Kirill Kaprizov, 54 games played, 26 goals, 37 assists, 63 points, above a point per game. He got off to a brutal start this year. It was widely speculated that he was still hurt from the Logan Stanley hits he sustained last season. He had another pretty brutal cross-check from Brendan Dillon, which took him out for a few games. Same team, Winnipeg Jets, same defensive core, Winnipeg Jets. Same player they're targeting, Kaprizov. 2 injuries in 2 games from the Jets on Kaprizov. Whether it's intentional or not, I'm staying out of that one because I don't know. I'm not the best guy to decide that. Once he came back from the Brendan Dillon injury, Kaprizov has looked like vintage Kaprizov. He is putting up above a point per game. He is playing lights out, 200-foot game hockey. He's been impressive. Eriksson Ek centering that line, and he's fluctuated in the top 3 center roles, mostly finding a spot in the top 2. Just want to make sure my dog's not eating plastic. Don't mind me. Eriksson Ek, 61 games played. He's one of the few players that have played every game this year. 28 goals, 26 assists, 54 points. He's playing absolutely elite defense this year. Got to give a shout out to Eriksson Ek. I think he's playing among the best of the best. I don't know if he'll be a Selke winner, but he should at the very least be in the conversation to be in the top 3, without a doubt. He's been that good this year. And he's going to hit probably 30 goals. He's 2 goals away from hitting 30 goals for the first time in his career, so that's fantastic. Matt Boldy, 54 games played, 23 goals, 24 assists, 47 points. We've seen Matt Boldy absolutely take over some games, and we've seen him just absolutely disappear from some games. He's an extremely streaky player. When he's hot, and when he's not hot, he's can be a bit of a liability on the ice at times, making rough passes, rough turnovers, and so on. So it depends which Matt Boldy you get. He's been playing hot lately. The first line's been shut down the last 2 games, so we'll see if that changes Matt Boldy's attitude, or we'll have you. Matt Boldy also sustained an injury throughout the year. Second line, you got Marcus Johansson stapled to that second line left wing. Don't ask me why. His stats, 61 games played this year, 9 goals, 18 assists, 27 points. That is well below the average production you want to see from a top 6 winger. He played well last year, especially on a line with Matt Boldy and Freddie Gaudreau, of all people. Right? He was on a line with Matt Boldy for a good chunk of this year. It hasn't worked out for him. He shows flashes of skills and talent. Like he's got this talent, but he just doesn't put in the effort, right? And it's really frustrating to watch. There are just shifts he'll completely take off. It looks like he doesn't care, which is frustrating because this is a very skilled and talented player who really is. It just seems like he's playing to keep getting contracts. Like he's playing well enough to stay in the league and get a contract, but doesn't care enough about winning type thing. And I don't know him personally. Could be completely different, but that's just the impression I get from watching this player on the ice. Marco Rossi, whatever. We've seen him slot. It depends on the game. He's, between the number 1 and number 4 seed. We saw him start as a fourth line center a couple games ago. I think he's been one of the most. Him and Joel Eriksson Ek have been by far the two most consistent centers on this team. Marco Rossi, I think, has played extremely well this year. I don't think his points necessarily do it justice because he's played with guys that aren't really putting up points or offensively focused. So 61 games played this year. Another guy who's played every game. 17 goals, 16 assists, 33 points. Again, playing a great 200-foot game. I did not expect Marco Rossi's defense to be as strong as it has been. I'm impressed. He had a Gordie Howe hat trick this year. He's like 5'9" or 5'8". I think he's 5'9". Like, he's a little guy. He doesn't weigh a whole lot. He dropped the gloves with a guy that was 6 foot and held his own. It was pretty impressive. So I got to give some credit to Marco Rossi. I think he's played well. I think he should stay in the top 6. He most likely, I don't know, it depends who's on his line, but probably should be around a point per game player in the next year or two. That would not surprise me at all. He's doing all those little things right. He's really got the whole game down to a science. It's impressive. He's a very intelligent player. He's getting in front of the net, getting to those gritty areas. He's got a decent shot. He's more of a playmaker. He's a great passer. But who's he going to pass it to? You have Zuccarello, not necessarily a goal scorer, and you have Johansson, who really is just taking shifts off. He's played on lines with like Marcus Foligno, and it's very limited time with Boldy or Kaprizov. So moving on to Zuccarello, 52 games played, 11 goals, 39 assists, 50 points. His points are good. His defense, he had about a 10-game stretch where he was playing decent defense. It's not like, it's probably league average defense at best. Right? He's not really known for his defensive ability, and that's okay. He's a great playmaker, but some of the games he's played on defense have been kind of brutal to watch. There's no back checking. There's no just weird line changes. Once they leave the offensive zone, he'll be the last one out. He'll change lines, and it kind of creates an odd man rush scenario. Most of his season has been spent with Kirill Kaprizov on that first line. Since he's moved to the second line, we've seen his point production slip a bit. It was 2 games ago, I think, against the Predators. It looked like he didn't even want to be there. He really took the whole game off, and a top 6 forward. You're locked in for 2 more seasons with a no movement clause. You need to be a little more better. You need to care a little more. Third line, which kind of was the fourth line-ish, you have Brandon Duhaime. 61 games played all 61 games. 4 goals, 4 assists, 8 points. Physical, very good defensive winger. I'm not mad at him with that production. Playing in a third line role. He's mostly played fourth line minutes this year, as he usually does. But he's looked fine. Again, you're not going to get a whole lot of offense with Brandon Duhaime, but that was expected before he came into the league. But he does all the other things of the game right, and he provides a lot of energy. Kind of the same thing with Connor Dewar. Connor Dewar has a little more of an offensive upside, but he's relied a lot on playing gritty, playing energy, playing defensive hockey. Right? So the offensive... The leash to let him loose offensively is still pretty tight. So there's definitely more offense with this player. It's if he'll have a chance to see it on the Wild or if he's traded with another team. 55 games played, 9 goals, 4 assists, 13 points. I think he's underrated for what he does. Dewar and Duhaime, 2 elite penalty killers. Them on a penalty killing unit are very, very good. So also 2 of the players that are on the trade block for the Wild, so losing them might hurt the Wild's penalty kill a bit. Ryan Hartman, I think he's played all right. He's had his ups and his downs, and lately he's having some downs. But 56 games played, right? Dewar and Hartman both with injuries this year. 15 goals, 18 assists, 33 points. He's got a nice shot. He can put the puck in the net. It's one of those guys you want to have lower in the lineup because he's not really a top 6 guy at the end of the day, but he can provide some really solid scoring depth for you. And at the cap of $4 million, that's okay. Fourth line, which is mostly AHL guys. Mason Shaw comes back. He played his first game last night, which I did not see against the Blues. No points. It's his first game back. Mason Shaw. That is so exciting to have this dude back. He's been through so much. 4th ACL surgery. Incredible. Lucchini, again, more of an AHL center. 20 games played, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points. I think he's played all right. I don't know. I don't really know if he's necessarily earned a spot in the NHL. I like the kid. I think he's plays with fire, but I don't know. Vinny Lettieri's been a pleasant surprise. 31 games played, three goals, 4 assists, 7 points. Lettieri, actually, I have him right here. Let's see. 0.23 points per game, which is about right for a fourth line winger. Averaging under 10 minutes of time on ice per game. I think he's been a pleasant surprise. I think he's earned a spot to stay in the NHL. He's played well. He showed he can move up into the lineup and fit in. He doesn't look out of place. So I like Lettieri. I think that's been a pleasant surprise. I thought it was just one of those depth forward signings over the summer. No, he's coming. I think he's like 27 or something, and he's looked great. Going on to the defense, Jake Middleton, 61 games played, 7 goals, 13 assists. I need to pause this because my dog is eating plastic. All right, I do apologize. Took care of the plastic scenario with my dog. He does it for attention. It's annoying. But he's going to sleep now, so. Back to the defense. I forget exactly where I left off. Jake Middleton, 61 games played, 7 goals, 13 assists, 20 points. There's a little bit of offense there, which is a little surprising. He'll jump up in the play, and he'll look good, but he's also responsible defensively. I forgot to put the overall plus-minuses on the board. Middleton's plus-minus is misleading. He spent a lot of time in the first half of the season on a line with John Merrill and Goligoski, so he was kind of left on an island for the most part, which led to a lot of goals against. Middleton's not one of those guys that can play his own position and pick up the slack for another player. He's good at doing his own job most of the time. It works, but he needs a competent defensive partner, and when he doesn't have that, it can kind of fall apart. As we saw earlier in the season, which really led to a pretty brutal plus-minus, right? Brock Faber, rookie Marco Rossi. Brock Faber, 61 games played, one of those guys who played every game. 4 goals, 30 assists, 34 points. Good puck mover, defensive defenseman first, and a pretty solid defensive defenseman. We've seen him hit kind of a wall the past maybe 10 or so games. Elite play, maybe not necessarily as he showed earlier in the season, but he's still a top pairing defenseman nonetheless. And he's battling through that wall, and I think he's doing all right. I don't think he's deserved any type of demotion at this point. Got to give a shout out to Brock Faber. Kid's 21, playing elite defense. It's like, that's nuts. Second line, you got Jonas Brodin. A little bit of offense with him that we really have never seen. 43 games played, 6 goals, 13 assists, 19 points. He's almost at a half point per game, which is a lot for Brodin. Waiver claim, Declan Chisholm from the Winnipeg Jets. 10 games played in the NHL so far, 1 goal, 4 assists, 5 points. Chisholm's looked good. His last 2 games, kind of iffy, but in general, pretty solid player. I think this is a guy they need to continue to give ice time to continue to grow in the NHL, especially next to a partner like Brodin. That's where Faber started next to Brodin, and it really helped Faber to grow and become a little more confident in his game. I think we'll see that with Chisholm as well. Going down to that third pairing defense, John Merrill, 44 games played, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points. He had a goal last night. I think the only goal. Zach Bogosian, 48 games played, 1 goal, 8 assists, 9 points. Bogosian has played time in the top 4 on a pretty consistent basis for the most part. Merrill has not. Merrill's averaging, I got the time on ice is right here. So you got Middleton, average time on ice, just about 20 minutes. Faber, a little over 25 minutes. Absurd. Brodin, 23 and a half minutes. Chisholm, 16 and a half minutes, right? You got Merrill, just under 13 minutes average time on ice. From a third pairing defenseman, you want a little bit more. You want that to be around 15, maybe 14, but there's really not a lot of confidence in John Merrill. Rightfully so. Zach Bogosian, a little over 17 minutes average time on ice. You got Marc-Andre Fleury, 900 save percentage, and Philip Gustafsson, 894 save percentage. Honestly, I think both of these goaltenders have played better than their save percentage would tell you. Fleury, I think, has had an outstanding season. That save percentage is extremely misleading, especially as of late. He's looking like vintage Fleury in the net. It's incredible to watch. It's a lot of fun. And Gustafsson, he's had some up games. He's had some down games. He's let in some pretty soft goals, but he's made some incredible saves. I think Gustafsson will be all right. I think there's a lot of heat thrown towards Philip Gustafsson, and I don't think all of that is necessarily warranted because of how the team has played in front of him. Right, and again, I'm not going to fully defend him. There have been some soft goals. There have been some easy saves he should has made that he hasn't. But overall, he's been a pretty solid player. So I can't throw him all that much hate. I don't think he's played. We've seen goalies this year play a lot worse than we've seen Philip Gustafsson play. IR, I put Freddie Gaudreau on the IR because at least there's an update that he will not be playing tonight. I don't know if he's actually on the IR. Technically, he's just a healthy scratch. Johansson is also injured tonight. Yeah, tonight they're playing the San Jose Sharks at 7 Eastern, 6 Central. But Freddie Gaudreau, 48 games played, 3 goals, 8 assists, 11 points. He's a minus 17. I think that is a team worst. Freddie Gaudreau. Let me pull up his contract. Where is he under scratches? Freddie Gaudreau. So he has a 15 no trade list, and this is year 1 of 5 of his new extension. The cap is not too bad, $2.1 million, fine, especially if he can play a fourth line role, but he's not even a serviceable NHL player at this point. He looks lost. He tries hard. He's a great guy. He's fun. He's funny. He does a lot for the community. Like, no ill wishes towards Freddie Gaudreau, but you need more production from him on the ice than you're getting, both offensively and defensively. So I think Gaudreau's kind of phased his way out. Now, I don't know if you can necessarily move a player like this. Bill Guerin of the Wild, the GM, has made magic happen. He went out and got a second-round pick from the Buffalo Sabres for a guy like Jordan Greenway, and just as an example. So we'll see if he gets traded. I'd be surprised if he gets traded, but this was Dean Neveson's boy, and Dean Neveson is no more. And I think Freddie Gaudreau played under current coach John Hines in Nashville, I think. Next up, Marcus Foligno, 49 games played, 9 goals, 11 assists, 20 points. Okay production, right? About what you want to see from a third-line player, which is fine. You want to hopefully see them around that 40-point mark, which he'd be fairly close to that, maybe like 37, 38. Marcus Foligno, excellent defensively, can throw hits, physical presence, leader in that locker room. One of the guys that got one of the extensions at the beginning of the year. Jared Spurgeon, the Norris caliber defenseman in Minnesota, played 16 games, was hurt for some of them. 5 assists in that time span. He's out for the rest of the year. He has a full no movement clause now, but I believe that becomes a modified no movement. I'm not going to look it up. Modified no movement clause or no trade clause. So he submits like a 10-team no trade list or 10-team trade 2 list or something like that on July 1st. So that could be incoming moves. Scratches, I got Goligoski up here. 30 games played, 9 assists. Goligoski, he'll look okay for some games, and in the last like 2 minutes, he'll throw just an awful blind pass in front of his own goal where there's only a player from the opposing team there, and it'll lead to like a really good scoring chance or goal for the other team. So Goligoski, his time in the NHL has definitely expired, and that's okay. No movement clause, though. Contract expires at the end of this year, so I'd be surprised if he has a job next year. Dakota Mermis, the Iowa Wild's captain of the AHL, 41 games played this year. 3 goals, 5 assists, 8 points. Overall, he's played well. His past few games, we've seen him hit a bit of a wall. But overall, in general, he's been a pretty solid, steady hand on that third pairing defense. I like Dakota Mermis. So those are kind of the stats. I'm not going to talk about the future. The future's pretty bright, but there needs to be some developing happening in the AHL and at lower levels or other leagues. They also have Marat Konstantinov coming over, which a roster move is going to need to be made because the roster has 23 spots. So you have to make a roster move to fit Konstantinov on the team. So what do we see happen? Maybe Lucchini gets sent down to the AHL and Marat takes over. We'll see what happens. So there's also that, right? So let's talk about highlights. Highlights, really every player on this first line for the most part. Kaprizov, once he got healthy, he's been looking like a superstar in the league, and there's no question about it. Eriksson Ek has been so good. Again, defensive first forward, but putting up close to a point per game, 28 goals, going to hit 30 goals. He's leading goal scorer on the team, right? Gets to those gritty areas, can be a bit of a pest for the other team. Boldy can take over a game. He'll look good most games. Can play pretty great defense. It's getting that on a consistent basis. Brock Faber, rookie. Oh man, this year's been unbelievable. Came in as a defensive first defenseman. A little bit of offense there, a little over a half point per game, which is great considering the responsibility he has on the ice. He's tasked against shutting down teams' top lines. He's out there every shift against Connor McDavid. He's out there every shift against a guy like Nathan McKinnon. Out there against Austin Matthews, right? And he's playing well. He's holding his own. It's really impressive. Right, so I really, I got to give credit to Brock Faber. I think he's leading the league, or leading all defensemen in the league in number of games played over 30 minutes, which is also incredible because you got some minutes eaters in the league. Drew Doughty for one. Marco Rossi, very pleasant surprise. I think he's been better than advertised coming into this year by far in both ends of the ice. Marco Rossi, again, projects to be around a point per game player in the near future, next couple of years. But his defensive game it's really impressive. I was not expecting him to be good defensively, let alone pretty solid. So Rossi, pleasant surprise, and Fleury just having a comeback year out of nowhere. He's been incredible the past, I don't know, like 3 months. He's been very good. Absolute misses. Freddie Gaudreau, again, minus 17, 11 points, under a quarter point per game. Has seen time on that second line as recently as 2 games ago, when Marco Rossi started on that fourth line and Gaudreau was on that second line. And we'll talk about that in a bit. Marcus Johansson, again, stapled to the second line. He's like the only player that, him and Kaprizov, I think, are the only 2 players that really haven't moved up and down the lineup. Less than a half point per game from Marco or Johansson, playing next to guys with talent. Like, he's not been the only guy on his line. He's not been put on an island. So you want to see more production from him. I don't know why he still is on that second line or hasn't been a healthy scratch. There are stretches of games where he looks awful. You need to do something with that. And Merrill Goligoski, we came into the season understanding that third pairing defense of Merrill and Goligoski was a massive concern. Right, and it has totally been a massive concern. Led them to trading Kalen Addison because between those 3, none of those guys were playing at an NHL caliber. We still see Merrill in the lineup. We still see him make rough passes, but play more of a reserve game. They went out to get Bogosian. They claimed Chisholm off waivers. They bring up Dakota Mermis, right? They bring up Damon Hunt for a few games. I liked Hunt. I think he should still be in the NHL, but I'm not the GM of the Wild. Spurgeon goes down with an injury. So, there's still questions to kind of shore up that defense. What's going to happen with Spurgeon? Are they going to trade him? Favor extension. What do you do with the third line? Do you re-sign Bogosian? There's questions there. And John Merrill's also signed for another year. So there's that. John Merrill should be a 7th defenseman at best. Really shouldn't see much ice time. I prefer Dakota Mermis play over John Merrill, but that's just me. So what happened? Well, they had a coaching change. Dean Evason, what is this, year 4 or something? Year 3 or year 4 of Dean Evason coaching, and he's brought this team to 100 points consecutive seasons. Got off to a pretty rough start this year, and I don't want to put all the blame on Dean Evason because he was coaching for his life right there at the end. But you had just guys not producing at an acceptable rate. Kaprizov, who was injured. Boldy looked awful. You couldn't get. He was a liability on the ice. Zuccarello was okay, but his defensive play in the beginning of the season was rough. He was making some rough turnovers. He didn't have a third pairing defense that was capable of being on an NHL ice. You had Gustafsson, had a couple of good games to start the season off, and then just got in his own head because the team kept losing. Right, there's a lot of pressure on the goaltenders, and I don't know if Gustafsson was able to handle that. And then the injuries start happening. A lot of injuries. At one point, I guess we'll talk about injuries now. At one point, the injuries, your highest played forward was Marcus Foligno at, what is he, 3 point something million? Where is Marcus Foligno? $3.1 million was your top paid forward. And your top paid defenseman was Jake Middleton. Jake Middleton makes $2.45 million. At one point, more than a third of players on the ice were AHL players. Just to put in perspective, they've had some rough times. So Dean Evason gets fired. I still don't really care for that decision to fire him and bring in John Hynes. They did. John Hynes, former Nashville Predators coach. He's shaking up some things, right? We've seen him move lines, take players from different lines, put them with different pairings, right? Eriksson Ek, all of a sudden, is a first-line center, which is, to be fair, he's probably the best center on this team this year. Hartman not playing in the top six. Freddie Gaudreau not playing in the on that second line, for example. But we're also starting to see John Hynes in some of his downfalls as well. It's widely known in Nashville he really suppressed those younger players and didn't really give them an opportunity to play. Once Hynes left, those players got more of a chance and blossomed into NHL caliber defense or players. We're talking top six forwards, top four defenseman type players. So Marco Rossi, when I talk about him playing on the fourth line a few games ago, played. So what do you have, like a 3 or 4 game goal streak? Like, he was playing lights out and he was playing defense and he looked excellent on that second line. Very next game to end that streak, he was placed on that third line with I don't even know who. Really no help to score, and then he was placed on the fourth line, and you have to wonder why. Why is a guy like Rossi getting demoted when he's playing well, and a guy like Freddie Gaudreau is being promoted to the second line when he's looked absolutely abysmal the past 15, 20 games? Rough. Gets hurt last night, which is unfortunate, but so we're starting to see this lack of developing the younger kids. Rossi back up to that second line, but we're also seeing guys like Johansson again on that line. At the very least, you got to give someone else a shot. Lettieri's looked good. Hartman, even, you can give a shot on that line. There are options that you can do. You have that don't include Johansson on that second line. I'm just throwing that out there. We're starting to see kind of John Hynes' natural coaching style come out a bit. Do we see Chisholm scratch? I don't know. We're seeing John Merrill continuously play over guys like Dakota Mermis, for example. We're seeing we're seeing some questionable decisions being made as well. So I don't really think Dean Evason was the issue with this team, but nonetheless, coaching change comes in, they go on a hot streak, and then they go cold, and then they were back on a hot streak until a couple games ago. They've lost 2 in a row. Are they going to go back on a cold streak? We'll see. Excuse me, my throat is dry. The buyouts, we talked about the previous Suter buyouts, still one more year of that left, $14.7 million against the cap. Really hampers what this team can put together. Overall, I think they've done a good, Bill Guerin, GM, has done a pretty good job. But I do have an issue with the extensions he gave out at the beginning of the year. I did a video on that. And I was hoping I'd be wrong, but no. The cap hits aren't too bad. It's really the term. Zuccarello declining a bit. Is he the best right winger on the team? Probably not. I'd say Boldy is better. Boldy getting those first line minutes. Zuccarello absolutely not caring because he's not playing with Kaprizov. Kind of an issue there. If Zuccarello can keep up the point production, that'd be good. But we'll see what happens, right? Who else? Marcus Foligno, big physical guy, leader, extended 4 years, $4 million. All these guys with no movement clauses. Right? His style of play, he gets hurt. He has an injury history. It signs him until he's in his mid-30s. Right? There's some questions there as well. Ryan Hartman. Hartman's great, but he doesn't have a defined role on this team. Where are you placing him in the lineup? Is he a center? Is he a winger? Is he a first liner? Is he a fourth liner? We've seen him play almost every position on this team throughout the year. It's been incredible, which is fine. But a guy like this has a lot of trade value. If you could trade him at the trade deadline, that'd be great. But all three of these guys got full no movement clauses, which extend into this year. The extensions start next year, but the full movement clauses extend into this year because of the new CBA contract. So you can't trade any of these guys. And some of these guys, like if you're to trade Zuccarello, you get a haul back. You can find someone to put in that top 6 that could work in exchange, right? There are options. Ryan Hartman will get you a pretty decent haul. I don't know if you'll get a first round pick for Hartman, but there you could get something for him. Marcus Foligno too, right? Pat Maroon also hurt. No, I think he's got like a limited no movement clause. Didn't get extended, but those extensions really hampering what this team can do at the trade deadline. Now that they're probably going to miss the playoffs, it's extremely likely they'll miss the playoffs. They can't do a whole lot. Two main guys you can move is Duhaime and Dewar, which is your top penalty killing unit, right? So then you have to find replacements and adjust your penalty kill because you're potentially trading these two guys. Let's see. Lack of caring. Some of these players, there are games they obviously just do not care. They want the game to be over. They don't want to be there. They don't want to be on the ice, which is fine to an extent. Sometimes it can be tough to get up for a full 82 game season plus playoffs if you're doing that every single night, and I get that. But there are stretches where some of these players really don't care. We've seen it from Freddie Gaudreau. We see it from Johansson almost on a nightly basis. We've seen it from Zuccarello the past few nights. We've seen it for Boldy for the beginning of the season, and I don't know, another 10 or so game stretch under John Hines, right? We're starting to see that from Ryan Hartman. He doesn't look all that happy with John Hines as the coach. There's questions. You need your players to want to win and play every night and support the team and contribute to the team, and they're not getting that. And they've had a lot of closed doors meetings. And it really hasn't resulted in much positive growth. Last up, inconsistency. This team is just inconsistent. There are a lot of players that get hot and get cold. Again, the easiest to point to is Matt Boldy. He's either really, really hot or he's really, really cold. But that's kind of consistent throughout the lineup. Again, you get Kaprizov hurt for the beginning of the year, and then he's killing it the rest of the year. But when he's hurt and you're relying on your superstar player to produce at a superstar rate because of your lack of depth, that hurts your team a bit. And that's no knock against Kaprizov. If you're hurt, you're hurt. Like, it is what it is. But just some inconsistency throughout the team. So it is a mishmash of a lot of different issues that have gone wrong with this team. The best thing they could have done is not extend those 3 players in Zuccarello, Marcus Foligno, and Ryan Hartman, and trade one or more of those guys to get some type of return and build for next year. Next year is your last year of the Parise Suter buyouts, $4.7 million against the cap again. That's the year you really want to start getting these young players into the roster, developing them, building them up. Marat Konstantinov should see an elevation, at the very least, third line ice time next year, if not as soon as this year. Right, you want to see Damon Hunt in the lineup. I don't care what happens to John Merrill, but you got to get Damon Hunt in the lineup. There are plenty of guys that really should be in the lineup, getting legitimate ice time and building towards the end of those buyouts, so this team can be competitive, not just to make the playoffs like they want, but to win a Stanley Cup, which they kind of need. There's a lot going on with this team, and I'm sure I'm missing a few things too, but there's potential here. They just need to put it all together. We'll see what happens. I think the Wild are going to be pretty quiet at the trade deadline, probably conservative sellers. We might see them buy a player or two, but you gotta start moving roster spots out. You have some guys that have come up and played well, Vinny Lettieri can fetch you something at the trade deadline. Lettieri, Minnesota native, a lot of ties to Minnesota. He wants to stay in Minnesota. He's never played as well as he has in a Wild uniform anywhere else. It's not a guy you want to ideally trade, but your options are so limited. You got to get something for nothing. You got to clear up roster. There's too many bodies, and there's too many bottom 6 bodies, right? You got Johansson in the entire bottom 6. everyone on the IR except Spurgeon. He's a defenseman. Yeah, our bottom six forwards. You have 5 guys who probably should be in the top 6. So, all right, that's it. That's all I got. It's a long video. I appreciate you watching, but I really want to talk about the Wild and what happened to them. Again, I'm sure there's more that I'm not covering, but this is already a really long video. I appreciate you watching. Take care, all right?